I'll wait till you're on. Just went too fast.
Yeah, it's just taking time to pitch up here.
Should be good now.
Is Kathy Evan?
Yeah.
Yay, Kathy.
I'm here.
Okay, call to order at 7:14. So me, Kathy, Jess, Glenn, and Mark. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Glenn and Jess. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone on the public?
There's not.
None? Okay. Discussion and next steps. So policy 5028. So questions, Jess?
Okay, so first of all, when we look at page number, we're looking at the numbers at the bottom of the page 7, 6, 84.
Right, it
Yeah.
starts on
Okay.
page 6 of
Okay.
84.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that. There's 3 different page numbers.
I know.
Yeah, so this was the policy that we had looked at and we had kind of just real quickly been like, okay, this is what comes from the state. It was in line with the state, comes from TIP, and we're all like, okay, blah, blah. And then I looked at it more later and realized that there was a substantive chunk of it that is optional. And I have a couple different concerns about that chunk. And we can either go through my concerns, or we can just decide that we don't want to include it if it's not required.
So where are you
I'll leave
starting?
that guy over to you guys. Page 36 of 84 is where it says optional addition to confidentiality policy. The school district may opt for dividing student records into the following categories and including these classifications in the confidentiality policy. Note, the following section is not required by statute, but may be included if desired by the school district. So I don't know, and I don't see any way to make this a short conversation unless you guys say, let's just strike it. But I don't know how we divide records currently. I don't know if what's depicted here is what is currently happening, because this is very, very specific. And if this is not what we're currently doing, this is going to be really intensive for our staff to alter this. So that was one question. We haven't had any conversation about how we currently handle this and what the impact of adopting this as board policy would be. So that's one question. Another question I have in this section pertains to.
Okay, can we do this one first?
Sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so there's just a couple of things. On page 37, right, the record and the location. So basic biographical information's in the cumulative file. Academic achievements in the cum file. Graduation or equivalence in the cum file. Immunization is in the health file. Attendance records is in the cum file. That notice of expulsion, we keep it here. Where do you keep it at your site? Do you keep, well, it's in the log entry, so it's
Yep.
digital
Right.
as well. And that's probably the only place that it's kept, because you probably don't keep a paper copy.
I keep
in a
paper
cum
copies
file.
personally, but we don't keep them in the cumulative files.
Correct. So that's
This is
our
what we do.
digital world and our right, and our versus our paper world. So
Okay, so this optional first part of the section is what we do.
right, and I think that under F, you could even just say notice of expulsion and take out the rest, because what we're all saying is notice of expulsion occurs, whatever it is, in a variety of different locations. So they're saying this, if this is optional and you want to change some of the verbiage, we can change it to what we really do, which is notice of expulsion occurs and we keep it at district, they keep it at the site, but they also keep a digital in the log entries record of that piece.
Not just for firearms.
Correct.
Or weapons.
For all expulsions, is what I'm trying to say.
But it's in the location says cumulative file.
That it's
in the
in their
district
power,
cumulative file,
it's in
but
Power School.
Yeah.
It's not in their paper file.
And that makes sense to me, because when I read through this, I was like, what are the chances that the way that this is being described is literally exactly what we're doing? And if it's not, are we tying our hands by approving something as board policy that maybe doesn't work for us, or, you know, and why are we doing that if it's not required? So that was kind of, because then you go on to that next page and there's
Okay,
a
wait 1 second.
whole lot of charts.
Clarification. Wherever it says cumulative file, does that mean the district cumulative file?
The cumulative file
Yeah.
is a paper file that resides in the district. So a secretary can go and find the piece of paper. But more likely than not, what we do now is we just go to Power School, but we have that duplication of both.
But it's at the building. Ellen.
Correct.
It's in the school office.
So it follows the student.
Yes.
Correct.
From school to school.
And
So-
when a student leaves, where's it go?
Then it must remain. We have to keep that file for a number of years.
Lots of
Where does
years.
it go?
Yeah.
It goes into what are
Restore.
called dead files,
Right.
Which is,
which
Where?
is, well,
It's at the sites for a number of years.
so it stays,
If
your
it's
last site at the
sped,
high school
it's here.
builds up at the high school?
Yes, and that's difficult. So that's why it's easier that we have digital. So the world is changing to digital, but we have not caught up yet.
There were like lots and lots and lots and lots of files in the basement here.
There's still
Student
our-
files, because you can't
Right.
get
And-
rid of them for
we have started that
a
digitization.
huge number of years.
So why couldn't you just put cumulative/digital, so it's in
That would help,
one or the
right?
other?
That's
whatever
perfect,
the
and then that
sites
would cover.
decide.
And that's probably the most updated way to do this.
All right, so wherever it says cumulative, you would do cumulative/digital.
I think that's appropriate. Because that is correct. All of
Or
this
maybe
information.
digital first/cumulative
Mhm.
/health.
Sure.
So
that's
everything
fine.
is digital, right?
Mhm.
And then get rid of everything after expulsion, so that
Right.
all expulsions become part of their file.
Right. Except if they're expunged, right?
It talks about that.
Yeah, it talks about that over here. Yeah, okay,
Hey, can I ask a question?
sure.
I don't want to get off topic here, however, this is about confidential information.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem like you have copies of stuff that also is in the cumulative file as well,
Digitally, we have copies of everything.
digitally, but you have
Yeah.
paper copies.
Yeah, well, right now, if a student is at the high school, we have their paper cumulative file. If they're at the middle school, then it's at the
Okay.
middle school.
Well, people aren't keeping copies in other places,
No.
right? This is
No,
just
right,
one
no,
file
no,
per
no.
student.
Correct.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that there's
Yeah.
not, oh,
And
I
there's
think
not
you have
open
that
access
form or
to
that
these
form.
things.
Right.
It's-
No, that's part of what this,
Exactly.
the
Right.
beginning paragraph of this whole section is about, is
Right.
protecting the privacy. And if
Exactly.
we're
Right,
Right.
delineating
Oh, yeah.
different sections,
All over
and
the
splitting up
place.
this file in a
Right.
different area, and this guy's got a copy, that guy's got a copy.
Right.
it
yeah,
makes
no,
no
that's.
sense.
Correct.
that's
We
not
have
how it
chaos.
And it's not
works.
it's not
Yeah.
efficient. Exactly.
Okay. So then for category B then, we can add digital to the locations. Is this what we do?
Yeah, we have to change cap CMT because that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so this is kind of old.
We'll just cross that off,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Is this part of
standardized.
current policy,
it
or is this the
does-
one we want to go to?
This is the new shipment model policy.
Right.
Okay, do
Right.
we have a current one?
Yes,
we
but it's,
received it last month.
Yeah, it's
very, very brief.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
it
2
doesn't
pages.
cover
and
So
all
this
this
of
is
it.
what was sent to
122.
the board for approval last month, and
Okay.
then we pushed it back to policy so we could discuss these optional sections more.
But yeah, standardized group test scores are kept in the cumulative file. Or.
So we just add digital.
And or.
Right, and you could add digital to all of those things.
Okay. And the same on the page 39 of 84.
Super, yeah.
Agree with Ben.
What number?
We don't
And
Diagno-
special ed stuff in a cumulative file. It's up to their special ed part.
right, and
It's
Any-
saying and or cumulative file or people personnel file.
Right, but typically when it, like, because that's like intelligence testing and that kind of thing, and those are very, very confidential. I mean, I don't,
Right, so that would be in a pupil personnel file, and maybe the student didn't qualify for special ed.
so no
Or if it's-
cumulative file for N?
No. And also, HIV is, yeah, totally confidential, as would, any confidential health information. So
I thought part of the reason for this, though, was as you move towards a digital world, all of this should be confidential. That
Right.
you would have the ability, especially for graduated students,
Mhm.
to consolidate all of their information into one saved
Right.
file, so that when someone requests
Mhm.
records from 15 years ago,
Right,
they're not digging around all of central office. So to me, it would make sense to make it more open-ended, so that if you guys decided that the best policy
Right.
was after they graduate, we consolidate everything into one file.
that does happen
But-
now, even though it's hard copy, right? So,
Right.
so from the various places, the health file, the cum file, if there's a confidential file, that all comes together and goes into a file on that child into the dead file, which sits in the school archives for 30 years, right? But to do, my concern is that if the child is still our student and all these things are in one place, then everybody has access to that. So right now, not everyone has access to a child's special ed files.
Right.
right,
Or medical,
That's
by law, you
correct.
can't, the medical has
All
to
of
be
that.
separate from
Correct.
personnel.
Right.
The only
Yeah.
people who can go and look at a child's, special ed testing have to be like a case manager or, and you have to
Right.
sign in and out, and it's highly,
they're under lock and key.
yeah,
and
yeah.
In a
Mm.
locked room.
But the same doesn't happen when they leave us, when they graduate.
So what happens is anyone who has gone through that testing, if we have a highly confidential, then it's in a locked room here. It's separate from the actual school, so it's in a separate place. But Ed was working on digitizing all of that, so that exactly what you're saying was, we were hoping was going to occur. But
But it's still digitized, it needs to be separate.
well, each
Right.
section needs to be separate,
Right,
absolutely,
right.
and access only for certain
Correct.
people
Correct.
to look at, absolutely. But we never got to the student part of the digitization of bringing it all together.
Mhm.
Kim has her hand up
Oh,
for a
sorry.
while.
No, I know you can't
Sorry,
see me. I'm
Kim, I
sorry.
can't
No.
see you.
I was just gonna kind of piggyback on what Fiona and Sue were saying. So I think, yes, everything that you guys are saying, and I'm certainly not an expert on the student records, but I think if you go further on to like page 42, where it talks about category D records, talks about different times of retention. So I think that could be part of the purpose of what the board may want to divide these into categories, because certain records, once you combine them into that one big file, then you'd have to keep them for the longest period of time that record has to be kept for. And if you kept some records separate, you could shred them and discard them in accordance with that retention record schedule. So that could be one of the benefits of why this might be an option for the board to decide to do, to minimize the amount of records you have to keep. Because if, as Sue and Sue are saying, when a student leaves, we combine all of that stuff together to one big file, then you've got to keep it all for the longest period of time, and there's nothing, or you'd have to go through each file, whereas if you did it, just my interpretation of why this might be an optional part of the policy.
Or you wait to digitize the whole thing until after some
Right.
of these
Yes.
years that,
Yes.
year 1, year 2, year 3,
Right.
and then you can have a more limited or a smaller amount to digitize.
But you're doing that now in accordance with what the state law dictates, correct?
Yes, so we're in compliance, yes.
Okay.
With all of these different pieces.
Okay. It's, except for N, should not be in cumulative, right?
Correct, that's in a pupil personnel file.
Yeah.
Because they may have been tested but not qualified.
Right. Okay.
Glenn has his hand.
I'm sorry,
So
Glenn.
this is pretty detailed. There's a lot of steps. There may be a transition period going digital, whether you want to start with new students coming in and people graduating, whatever the process may be. What do you add? This can't be implemented in a week without weeding out what we can and can't do in this very long and lengthy document. Correct?
Well, it could be by just not including any of the optional stuff, and then we'd be covered with the FERPA stuff, and then revisit this at another
There's a
time.
lot
It's
of,
just page 36 to 44.
We
I
could
think.
do that.
Yeah,
Right, and then just wait.
that would be my suggestion, because I think this is very, very detailed and specific to be written into part of a policy, and if it's not legally required, we may want to take a beat and think about how much of this we actually want to include in those, because those were the pages that I had looked at as well. 36 to 44 is my understanding of the portions that are optional. So maybe we just approve what is required and then come back to.
Wait on the other.
yeah, because we could be here all night talking about we should do this, ifs and buts and candies or nuts here, but I don't think this is really the time best spent here, us figuring out how to implement the other 40 pages of this thing. Now, the first 30, are we sure that we're in compliance? Because there is some detailed information in here. Have we read through this entire thing, or did we just say, oh, this is shipment and good, this is a shipment thing, it's gonna be good?
No,
No, we read through it.
Okay.
Mhm. So then, is it the purview of this committee to send this to the full board, minus what's optional, and we'll take a look at optional at a later date?
That would be my suggestion, and I would add one other suggestion, is that before it goes to the full board, that either we as a committee or admin, look through all of the legal references that are here, because some of these legal references tie to the optional materials, not to the materials that would be actually part of the policy. And I don't think it would be good practice for us to include them as references if they're not tied to what we're approving.
Where are the references?
Page 34, 31, 35. That's what I'm talking about.
There's another one,
So-
page 10 of 84, section 3, annual notification. Do we have something in the student handbook talking about the rights regarding personal information and
Yes.
educational records? There's something already in there?
Yes.
And
So,
there's an appendix A in here with the model language as
Right.
well, that's not part of the optional section. It's after you get past the optional section, it's part of this. So it's
Appendix A as well.
right here, but the model notification. But yes, we already have it in our handbook, but it is part of it. So,
would you be able to look through those
The legal
stats,
references?
the legal references, and if any pertain to the optional, to take them out?
Yeah, Kim and I are gonna do that, right?
Would you be able to do that for the next meeting, or
Yeah,
if you
no, I can
can't,
do
we
that.
can do the following?
For the full board meeting?
Yeah,
Kim?
Would you be able to
Yeah.
do it for the, yeah? Okay. Okay, so let's do that. So it's without the optional. And then look at the, I don't know, the regs, I guess, the regs, the statutes.
So it's page 36 through 44 that we're gonna
Yep.
omit, right?
Yep. And then from page 34 and 35,
Yep, that's where the statutes are.
that's where
Okay.
the statutes
What
are.
about the appendixes? Are you keeping those or getting rid of them on page 45?
What page?
45 of 84?
I just think this is more involved than you guys think. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a party pooper here. I mean, if we're taking out the categories, page 14 says all records must be kept by categories.
But we
I
did
believe
keep
the
them back
statute
then.
says we have to do it, we don't have to put it in policy.
Have to do what?
Keep them.
We have to categorize
Right.
records.
Which
in
we
certain-
already do.
Right.
In accordance with all
That
those
is exist-
statutes.
that
That's the
is
state
happening.
law,
They're-
right?
they're- so-
We
so
have to
that-
do
That's
that.
required.
And
We
that's
just don't
what we
have to
do.
back-
So then we have to define our own categories.
Internally.
Right.
We can do it internally. It doesn't have to be part of board policy.
Does that have to be part of
Right.
the
Part of
policy?
board
No.
policy and then adopting these specific categories.
So the categories that the records policy wants to follow, you're defining categories, but we don't have to define what the categories are in the policy.
Yes. So Shipman wouldn't say it's optional if it was legally required. It's suggested practice, but if it doesn't mesh with what works best for our structure or what we currently have in place, if we're not in a place to, because once we institute this, this is our policy and we're saying this is what we're doing. So it's just a matter of process. And there are other things in addition to those categories in those pages, some of which are somewhat controversial and the law is somewhat vague that we may feel we need to have additional discussion on. So the safest route is to just approve the things that are
So I think
mandatory.
appendix that you're
And then you can
looking
revisit
at,
those others.
it's just a model notification we do one every year that goes in the handbook. So
So just don't put it in. We don't like to put forms in the policy.
yeah, we don't have to
anyway.
have it
Right.
in there because we have our own notification. We
So
don't,
no appendix A?
Did we, sorry to interrupt, did we also include this in our other, one of our other policies? The, 'cause what was the other one that we had, because there was a few that we had broken out. This model notification, I feel like that showed up somewhere else.
that came up in 5193 is the
Yep.
one you're talking about that was kind of like just a mess of a whole bunch of different things. And that's how, Kim, help me remember this, that's how we discovered, right? That we were so remiss.
Because we were trying to backtrack all of those other policies that were all kind of intertwined into one policy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're asking if we're being redundant, no, we're not.
That's what I was trying to remember, if this model notification had showed up and then something else that we had already approved.
No. So 62 through 68, we're gonna strike. Okay. Okay. Okay, so just so that I
And
understand.
that's the end of that.
So that, this particular
Particular
FERPA policy, we're gonna eliminate the optional section that we talked about. We're gonna eliminate the appendix. And we're gonna check the statutes to make sure that we're not including any that don't apply. and-
Correct.
And bring it to the full board
Yes,
for the January meeting.
yes.
Okay.
So we're basically ending on page 35, the whole policy, right? We're not taking anything after that. Am I right?
Correct.
That's correct. That's how I understand it.
Yes. Kathy, that work for you? Okay. Mark, do you have any?
That the committee consider moving the dress code to the next item, maybe because the middle and high school principal are here and start their day hours before tomorrow morning, yes.
Sure, we can. Are you all set with this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so where are we? Dress code, which is.
So that's gonna be at the end of the packet.
F.
It's page 81 of 84.
Get that. Okay.
This is our current board policy on dress code.
Okay.
Did I already? Oh, I gave you, oh, I guess I already gave that out, sorry. I passed it out, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the packet is what you have is, as it appears in the current middle and high school handbooks. And there's some verbiage for what appears currently in the elementary handbooks. The elementary handbooks are all the same. And then Jess had asked for prior iterations of the handbooks. Unfortunately, there are not many available because now that we're living in a digital world, people just write over what they had the previous year. So it's not a situation where we can say, okay, there's a copy of, every handbook for the past 10 years in the principal's office. Yeah. So,
No,
what you handed out, so I was able just to go online and just Google it, like Torrington High School Handbook 21, 22, and you can still find that through a Google search, and the same thing with the, I don't think I was able to find the middle school. No, I was able to find both of them. But it's fairly consistent with what you gave us tonight. So it looks like the high school last year, this one that you handed us out tonight, 2019 to 2020, was at the high school last year. And this year is the first year that this new shorter dress code policy is in the high school handbook. And it looked like the middle school maybe had switched over the previous year to this new shorter version. So currently they're both the 2022, 2023
Yes,
version.
they're the same.
But last year, the high school was different than the middle school. So what was at the high school last year, like what's currently at the high school was adopted from the middle school last year, it looked like. But I don't know, because I had heard that there was some revisions going on at the building level, but none of that was discussed at the board level. So I thought it would be good for us, because I know I'm speaking, but I'm sure I know I'm not the only one that hears concerns from staff and parents and students all the time about dress code violations. And so our board policy says it is the expectation of the Board of Education that the dress code as prescribed in the student handbook will be enforced at all times by the administration of the school. And clearly that it has not consistently been followed. And so there were changes made. So I just thought that would be instructive for us to look at what were those changes. And if we were going to look at revising our policy, we may want to know where we had come from and where things currently are. So all to say the information you brought was consistent with what I found, and I think it's helpful.
Can I just ask that we stick to what we want the policy to be and not discuss whether people are enforcing things, not enforcing things, that we just stick to the policy? If the board wishes to make a change to the policy, that's why the policy is being brought forward.
Then yes, I suggest that we make a change to the policy, that any changes to the dress code need to be approved by the board. I would suggest that. I'm not.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, there's obviously a huge change that was made from 2019 to this 2021 to 2022. It's a humongous change.
But the policy wasn't changed.
I know.
So the policy, so what do you want to change in the
suggest-
policy?
What I was just asked to suggest was changes to the board policy, and that's what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that we alter our board policy to require all dress code changes to come to the board and not to be made at the building level. Because when we're hearing all these complaints from people about things, the state of things in the building.
Okay,
So I'm responding to Fiona's request.
okay. In my view, and this is only my view, that's micromanaging the buildings who have control over their building. we have a policy, they follow the policy. So do you want a policy that dictates what a person can wear, what they can't wear, how many times someone has to discipline them and all that? Or do you want them to control their building?
So when we had an issue with cell phones and with our board cell phone policy not being enforced, the way that the majority of the board voted to deal with it was to override the current policy and to put new structures in place that forced the buildings to abide by the board policy. So I would have been fine with this being a building level decision, but it was not enforced at the building level. And in addition, huge changes were made to what's even required in the dress code. I mean, this is a wildly different dress code policy. And none of that was ever discussed at our level, and this has been an ongoing issue.
Again, I'm
So-
gonna ask that we refrain from saying it wasn't enforced at the building level, because our policy, that's the board policy, is enforced. What's happening in the student handbook, the change, they had the right to do that. So if the board wishes to change that, that's what we're here. So make a suggestion.
I did
of
just
what
make a
do you wanna
suggestion,
add.
and I'm
So
gonna
what
draw your
language do
attention.
you want in here?
I'm going to draw your attention to letter D, which said is the expectation of the Board of Education that the dress code as prescribed in the student handbook will be enforced at all times by the administration of the school. So you can't tell me that we're not allowed to talk about whether or not that happened when we're talking about the
If you want to evaluate
policy.
staff in public, then keep going. I'm asking you to refrain from that and address the policy. What do you want in the policy?
I want in the policy that any changes to the dress code need to come before the Board of Education. I would also like to see in the policy specifics of what is required for dress code. What are our standards for a district? Nobody has a problem if we went to uniforms with that discussion. So
No one is
this
having a
is,
problem, Jess. We're asking for suggestions of what
I'm giving you a
people want and-
suggestion. I'm
Right.
giving you a suggestion. You're taking shots at everything I say. So this is my suggestion, because this has been an ongoing issue and we're all aware of it. And there are other
Okay.
things that have come forward that are concerns, students wearing animal
Okay,
headgear,
so
all sorts of
recommend-
other
please,
things that
Point of
don't.
order, recommend what you want the change in the policy to be, and please stop evaluating if people enforced things or didn't enforce things. It's not appropriate. Ask what you want in the policy, and if this committee agrees to move that forward, that's fine. But please refrain from discussing what was enforced and not enforced. It's not appropriate.
You're choosing to present my words in that manner, so. I would like to add to our board policy that any changes to the dress code at the building level come forward to the board for approval. I would also then like to add these 2019 to 2020 or 2020 to 2021 dress code specifications as part of our board policy.
So you want the
these-
expectations to be part of the policy?
Yes, and I don't want the current expectations to be part of the policy. I want the previous expectations to be part of the policy.
The 1920, not the
Yeah,
2021 or 21,
well, depending
22?
on what you look at, it's 2021, 2022 for the Torrington High School Handbook online. So it's what was in the high school handbook last school year, which is not that long ago.
Not this one.
This one, the one I handed
This
out.
is 1920.
That's what you're referring to, then, right?
Yeah, the
This
text
one.
is the same. The text is the same. If you pull up the 2021, 2022 Torrington High School Handbook, which you can still find through a Google search online, it shows the same text as what you handed out tonight in the 2019, 2020.
Ellen, can I ask, if we can ask the two principals,
Yes,
if
please.
there's items that are problematic in their buildings, that it would be helpful if the board incorporated into the policy, so that, you know, if a parent is giving you a hard time, that it may be easier if it was incorporated in.
First, I would like to ask, this policy, does it hinder you or does it help? Should it be more in depth?
It doesn't hinder us in terms of what's included in the board policy.
No, I think it lists what we need to do, and I think it is in our dress code policies for it, so I think it is.
You mean your handbook?
Your policy is written now, I think it does provide us the guidance that we need.
Okay. So are you using the 22-23 or the 21-22?
22, 23.
Yeah.
So can you just talk about why there was a difference between what happened between one and the other?
Sure. So the 2019-20 dress code was out of date. There's items on there that are just not a factor. Additionally, there's a great deal of difference between what was allowed in the dress code between the different buildings. One of the bigger items on there was head coverings. The middle school, when I got there, was the only school that was not allowing hats. All the other schools were allowing hats. So we had a leadership team committee, and the leadership committee wrote the new dress code policy. So faculty members and parents.
Kathy?
I just have a question, because I'm, reading this, and the policy to me, which, I lived under, always referred to the Board of Ed dress code, and then our handbook had pretty much the same thing that I'm reading now. I guess my question is, are we confusing dress code as the board policy with dress code that's listed in our handbooks? Should that just be guidelines per dress code policy, or call it something differently? Because I'm wondering if that's what part of the confusion is. Our dress code is very succinct. It gives us four little bullets. And then I know that at the school level, we would look at those guidelines and align them with policy. But like John said, we did it because things changed. We needed to keep it more updated and working for the buildings. So is it the wording in the handbooks that's the concern, but the policy is what the policy is? I don't know, just wondering.
So could you say student handbook, dress code, procedure, policy, guidance, something different? Because I think Kathy's right. I
Right.
think some of the verbiage is tripping us up as well.
I think policy causes confusion because what's in the handbook isn't the policy. The policy is 5040, but the guidelines that address that policy are in each of the handbooks, and they vary by levels because they need to.
Expectations for school.
So it could just be an
Good.
expectation, just
Yeah.
put expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But note in that it's per policy number 5040. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
In accordance with Board of Ed policy number. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Mark, you had something to say about this the last time.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear very often is it's unclear to staff and unclear to students. So that's where, and that's what I hear. If it's not a shared, people don't feel like they always know what is okay and what's not okay. And that's a kid thing, and that's at times a teacher thing.
Or maybe a parent thing.
And at times a parent thing, because the parents are probably the ones who are buying the midriff wear.
Exactly.
Sports bra.
Yeah.
But you know what? I have kids in college, and you go there, and they're all wearing the same stuff. I went shopping for my daughter. It's hard not to buy that stuff because
It's a trend.
it's the majority of the marketplace. So so I would just my thing is whatever is decided. It's like the Yonder Punches. This is just how we do it now. So remove any lack of clarity.
So this, well, I'm going to call expectations now for the middle and the high school is unclear.
I think that's what I hear. Yeah.
Is it unclear to you?
I think at times it's frustrating to me, but not unclear. You know, like the torso bearing shirts, you know, the girls will wear them over, you know, they'll wear a sweatshirt over it.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times a day do you want to tell the girl to, you know, zip up your sweatshirt? You know, we in our school we still tell the kids to take their hoods off. You know, whether we should or we shouldn't, you know, the expectation should be hoods are off, you know, and I think there's a frustration that you're telling the kid 15 times a day to take the hood off, you know, so it's those things, you know, and I think, you know, that's what I hear, you know, and whenever I talk about policy, people are always like, dress code. That's the number one thing that people talk to me about.
So do you think the policy is clear and the expectations need to be more
Clarified
specific? Yeah.
and reiterated, and then there's it's almost like the underpouch. If you have this many infractions, then this happens. I mean, that's hard though with clothing, right? Because like you say, how many times are you asking them to zip up the sweatshirt?
Right. And that's more of a your thing than my thing, you know, like if there's kids fighting, you know, you're not gonna say zip up your shirt, you know, and you're not gonna, and you're not, and the administrators, and it should probably say principal or designee in here, by the way, should, you know, they can't go around with a tally mark saying I talked to Susie 9 times about but
Right, because you got to teach.
is there a way to flag the, you know, some of these kids who are doing it all the time? You know, I think that would help if there were guidelines for that sort of building level guidelines, perhaps for that.
I've been working with the security associates. I'm just putting this out there, and many of them believe that what they consider to be kind of a loose dress code makes their jobs harder, that it's problematic. Just sharing.
Well, it looks like the elementary handbook, it's more specific. The 5 things they have listed, right?
Oh, so this is, what is this one?
So
That was given out to us tonight because I had asked for them to show us what the policy used to.
does there need to be a difference between elementary and higher up, different?
Yeah, I think
so.
Yeah.
I think so. Also, I think it might be better at the high school than it is at the middle school through no fault of anybody else's, but I think sometimes the high school kids kind of mature with how they dress, where sometimes the 13.
I'll beg to differ on
think?
that one.
I was gonna say.
I said I think.
I don't
I
think
said I
so.
think.
I
You know,
don't
like
think
I
so.
think we have a lot of, you know, some girls in the building that don't quite know how to put their outfits together anymore.
That was so well put.
Yeah, very politically correct.
So I certainly don't think that all of our students disobey the dress code, but the problem is, like, I completely hear what Mark is saying about it being vague, like this, wear clothing that does not reveal parts of the body that should remain covered. That's subjective, and or reveals your torso or undergarments. So what about booty shorts? According to this, whether or not you wear booty shorts is totally subjective. And that puts our staff in a difficult position because who's going to say something now? You're the person who's looking at the booty, right? If you're the person that says something, it doesn't say here that they can't wear that. And that's where, and I'm not advocating for the board to take over all of these things, but we had talked about this before COVID with the handbooks, and my recollection of our conversation was that major changes to the handbook's happening at the building level, but major changes to the handbook should come to the board. And this is a major change, and it's also an issue that we hear a great deal about. And so that's why if I'm put on the spot and I'm asked to say what specifically do I want to see put in the policy, I'm going to go back to the more stringent one, which we have on record. That doesn't mean that I don't think that there's room for discussion on that, of course, but I think that this new one leans a great deal on, like you've got like 2 paragraphs talking about philosophical understanding of why kids dress certain ways and whatnot, and then you have 3 bullet points that are much more vague than what we used to have. And I don't think that that puts something meaningful in the hands of our families, in the hands of our staff, in the hands of our students to know what's expected of them. And I don't think that what's happening now is what, I don't think anybody at the table is comfortable with what's happening now in practice. So I think whatever the board needs to do to draw a cleaner line about what's expected, what standards we want for our students and how they present in our district, I think it's our responsibility to do that. And I'm open to all suggestions of what that sounds like, but what we're doing now is not, it's not it. And I do recognize that this is a very difficult thing to address. And I agree with Glenn, living in
Yeah,
teenage world for
I-
a long time, it's
As soon
really,
as
it's
it
hard for the
started, I
kids to
wanted
find
to
things to
abstain from
wear.
any kind of
Like,
comment.
it really is difficult. It's difficult.
So what do you want changed in the policy?
I think she already said it. I mean, yeah.
So you
I'm
want
sorry.
the buildings to come up with a better expectations.
No, well, what I said was that I want changes to the dress code to be brought to the board before they're implemented in the buildings. And I also said,
Expectations. Let's,
changes to the dress code.
like what Ms. Toder said, we have the dress code
Right.
and then there's
Well, the
building
confusion is,
expectations.
yeah, but changes to the building level expectations, I think need to be brought to the board because I do think it impacts the whole district.
So just make that E.
Yes, and also because I am uncomfortable with the current policy. If me as a board member, my list of rights is
wait.
very slim, but one of them is to suggest policy, then I'm going to suggest that we put these details into the policy. And if that, people are not amenable to that, then I think we can have more discussion. But
You
that's
don't
my
object to the
suggestion.
policy, you object to the expectations.
I object to the policy not including the requirement that changes to expectations need to come to the board. And I also suggest that we put this verbiage from 2019 to 2020 into the board policy. That is my suggestion.
But that only applies to the high school, middle school.
I don't see any reason why this couldn't apply to all districts. I mean, I think all students, I mean, I don't think that many of these things are gonna come up in the elementary schools. But if they did, I don't think we would want that to happen, right? Like, I mean, I don't see anything on here. I don't
Did this,
know.
is this thing a shipment thing or anything? This?
No,
No,
no, they don't
They
have
don't
one.
have one.
it's what the,
The faculty and the parent, the middle
Right.
school wrote it.
Faculty and parents?
yes.
I'm kind of with Jess on this. It's almost like a girl could come in with booty shorts, but a dude wearing a Heineken shirt or someone else coming in dressed as a cat is okay. But a guy wearing a
No,
Heineken shirt is in
no,
big trouble.
Heineken, no, no.
Yeah,
Be
the
okay.
Heineken
No.
shirt
Is out.
But do you see
is out.
The
The
irony
cat
here?
and the booty shorts are okay.
the cat and the birdie shorts are okay, but the Heineken shirt is, poof, you're in big trouble. I got, me personally, I got a problem with that. I mean, I think that's ridiculous.
So then.
We actually spoke about this before. We were talking about doing uniforms. And yet we go from a policy in 2019 to 2022 to 23 that's much less restrictive. And like Jess said, there's more in this document about worrying about equity and inclusion than actual dress code. I mean, I don't mean any disrespect for anybody who did this and put it together, but I don't know. I think it's a little, the older one had more teeth in it than this new one.
So you're saying if someone came in, a middle schooler, and they had the little headband with the cat ears, that would not be acceptable?
No, that's acceptable. But the kid wearing a Heineken t-shirt's in big trouble.
Well, but it's in here, no Heineken, so
But
it's,
he's saying that currently it would be
I think that's
permitted
ridiculous.
for a student to wear.
But it would
no,
say,
it wouldn't.
wouldn't
You're
that fall,
saying
a
wouldn't
cat-
that fall
the
under
cat ears,
headband?
he's-
It's my
or-
opinion. I'm saying
Kerchief.
it's, or the girl that has the shorts halfway up
Would
the
fall
crack of
under
the
that.
booty is okay. But the Heineken t-shirt, whew, you're out. Or a Heineken sweatshirt. Or Corona, I don't know, whatever your flavor is.
So you're interpreting then the second bullet, wear clothing that does not reveal parts of the body that should remain covered. So
Yep.
you're thinking, your interpretation is booty shorts that don't cover that part of the body is not a part of the body that should be revealed.
Correct.
or is a part of the body
Who's
that
gonna
should be
determine
revealed.
how much of the cheek of your butt's gonna be hanging out that's acceptable? I mean, versus the other one, skirts, shorts, dresses, or jumpers shorter than fingertip length are prohibited. That's a little bit more specific. Versus, you can't reveal, certain parts of the body. Well, who's gonna determine what parts of your body are revealing or not? It's very subjective.
And he's not saying that he personally thinks it's okay
No,
for that. He's saying that this is open to
I
interpretation.
hate the yoga pants for Christ's sakes, but you can't do anything about that either.
Oh, you can.
Well, those damn things.
I think if you do the specific list, you would have to add something to allow administration to address things that we may not know about yet.
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because things keep
The next
changing,
trend.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. And I do think part of why
Sports
this all
bras.
became so difficult was because of COVID too. I
Right.
think you had kids in the building sporadically, you had when I say that it wasn't enforced, I'm not attempting to besmirch anybody. I'm just saying there's a lot of reasons for that, right? And it's just, where do we go from here?
Well, and people, adults too, we're accustomed to dressing casually,
Mhm.
especially from the waist down,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just gonna say, so I had a uniform when I was in high school, and we did have that fingertip rule. And I used to go out of the house with my little plaid skirt, my pleated skirt. As soon as I rounded the corner, I'd cinch up the waist.
I-
So this is a,
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
this is
been
not a
around
new
for a long
problem.
Absolutely. What is new?
Even
I
without
think,
uniforms.
the expectations, what is culturally acceptable or what is acceptable, and what our teens and younger consider acceptable,
Right.
I think has changed. Because things that, even when I graduated in 1995, which I guess isn't forever ago, it kind of feels like it, but there's things that we never would have. Nobody would have dreamed of wearing some of those things. And now it's like when they go to the mall, this is what's on the front
Right.
display, and in the kids' defense, it's what's being marketed to them. It's what they're seeing everywhere. So if we want something different for them, then we have to specifically tell them that. Because it's not clear.
Well, that's Mark's point
Yeah.
too, right? Christmas
Yeah.
shopping, and that's what you're able to find,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
For
I mean, I
parents
will
as well
say,
as kids.
Being
So,
up
yeah.
at the high school to help with drop-offs the first couple days of school, that was an eye-opener for me, really.
The being specific, though, I think at some point it really, there's a bad side to it too, because at one point, you couldn't wear shoes that had no heel,
Mhm.
and every single kid wears slides.
Right.
Yeah, and that they used to be banned, and now
Mhm.
everybody wears them. They wear them in six
It's
feet
the
of snow.
style. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
shorts too.
and
Mhm.
shorts.
When I was in middle school, girls couldn't wear pants to school.
Yes, I
Times have
remember that,
changed.
yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
I've had discussions with the kids in class about, you guys laughed at us when we talked about the phones. Take out your yonder pouches. We're having the same conversations about hoods. Like,
Mhm. Right.
come on, like
Mhm.
let's not stop
Exactly.
having these. And I know we've said the same thing. It's 10% of the kids less. 90% of the kids are doing exactly what we want to do. 90% of the time.
And dress code is one of those things that it does spread, because kids don't sit there with a handbook in front of them every day. They go more by what they see other kids wearing. So if you've got a few kids that get away with it at the beginning of the year, and now in October you got a larger percentage, November a larger percentage, because they see other kids getting away with it and it's what they want to wear because that's what's cool. And so then there you go.
Well, it also could be they think someone else got away with it. But
Well,
maybe
if they
they
see you
didn't get
walking
away
around
with
all
it.
day with it
So
on,
therefore
you're
they
getting-
think
yeah.
I can get away with it. Do you know what I mean? So that's perception is reality.
Well, right. And so that's where in my opinion, like what the kid does, like how you deal with that. Do you send them home? Do you keep a bonus box of gigantic shirts in the office that you give out? Like how, like that part of it, I think is building, you handle that at your building level the way that it makes sense. But what the standard is itself, because then people will know, like, well, she came to school with that little, sports bra on, and now she's got this gigantic bright yellow t-shirt from Goodwill that she's wearing. So she didn't get away with it, right? Or he. Nobody should.
So what are we doing here? We're adding a bullet line to number, we're
The
gonna add letter E.
suggestion is to add letter E, that any expectation changes will come to the Board of Ed for approval.
Okay, Do we need to vote on that?
We don't vote in
decide
subcommittees.
If we want to move it. to
So-
the full board.
And is there anything else you would like to add?
I don't like this.
That's completely different. Right now, what are we, the policy, what do we want changed in the policy? This is a different discussion.
Okay.
Any expectation changes will come to the Board of Ed for approval.
Okay.
That's for the policy.
Okay.
If we want these expectations to change, that's a separate. It's
Well,
not,
no,
that, it doesn't, it affects the policy, well, the policy will affect this, and if we want them, I didn't mean them, we want the middle school and the high school to change their expectations and bring it to the board, that would go to the full board, and that would be something different. Right now, just what do we want to change in the policy?
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
so do we want anything else besides expectation, any expectation changes will come to the full board for approval?
So my additional recommendation was that we put this text of this stringent dress code into the policy. I know you view it as two different things, and it can be, but that's not my recommendation.
It's kind of giving them the,
So,
it's
The,
pulling
I
away
would
their
also,
flexibility
I would
to.
also
Right.
be okay with us just adding E,
Mhm.
that changes have to come to the board with the understanding that that applies to these things that are currently in there, and give the administration the charge to bring us back something that's more in line with the previous dress code, and to do it within a certain number of months. I think that would also be, I'd also be fine with that, because I don't care if every jot and tittle of this is in the board policy, but I keep getting told that all I have discretion over is board policy, so that's what I'm looking under. I'm totally
So
fine
if
with
we only have
administration
discretion over board
hearing.
policy, then we can't say anything about this.
Well,
Yes, we can,
If you put it in board policy.
because the expectation changes come to the full board for approval.
yeah, there's a-
So we do
So
have
that
kind of
covers
say over
the-
this.
Yeah.
Yes, Kathy?
Am I wrong? But if by adding these expectations into the policy, aren't we really starting to micromanage what's going on in our buildings? We have administrators who work with their faculty, who get suggestions and recommendations for behavior, for dress code, I don't know, whatever we want to say. But I think we need to leave that at the discretion of our building administrators, our assistant superintendent, those are the people we hired to do this job. It's not our job to run the school buildings. It's our job to set policy, and adding those specifics into the policy, I feel like we're micromanaging, and I disagree with that, and I won't vote for that, in favor of that.
Are you comfortable with adding E? Any of the expectation
I
changes?
don't know why those expectations have to come to us unless there are changes in what they're, because in my mind, their handbook is their handbook. It's not the Torrington Board of Ed handbook. It's the school's handbook that our administrators and our central office administrators review, look at, and make certain that we are supplying a legal handbook to our families. So I think we are really getting in the mud here, and I don't feel like it's where we belong. So I don't think E is even necessary. I think D says it all. And I think if there are substantial changes, that I would trust that the administrators would bring that information to us as a board.
So you're perfectly fine, Kathy, with the way the dress code policy, well, we can change policy, the dress code 22-23, what this states. You're perfectly fine with it as compared to the prior one.
That's not the policy. The policy is what's in front of us that says.
Okay.
changes
I'll
will
read-
be-
I'll-
40.
I'll rephrase, the dress expectations for the school from 2019 to 2023. You're okay
I
with the
think-
way it says?
I think what we need to do is if we have trouble with those expectations, then maybe that's the message we give to administration. Please go back and rework these so they're more specific, so that the dress code policy that is under the board's purview is being fully enforced.
Isn't that what E in the policy would do?
I don't see the reason for it. I think that, no, I mean, as far as if that's in the handbook, those are the expectations. Hey, believe me, there's nobody more than me that thinks we need to tighten up on dress code. And I think if you look at the one that was at the elementary level, it is much more specific. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I also think that middle and high schoolers are different students. They're different learners. And then we have to trust what the people in both of those buildings are telling us works for their building. And just for the record, kids at Torrington never wore a hat because I was out there on police control from the minute they walked in the door. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, or hoods.
Or hoods, never.
Yeah. So I'll ask you too also, have you received a lot of complaints on dress codes from parents, teachers, other students?
I've not had any voiced from parents. If we look at
Or
our Swiss
teachers.
data, there's very few. We just pulled our referrals. There's very few referrals for dress code in there. I think it was really minimal when we pulled it. So
Have teachers?
I think when I came here, I have to be honest with you, when I came here, I did read this dress code policy expectation, let me be clear.
Yeah.
And it was really different from what I'd seen in the past. And what I liked about it, and the reason I wanted to keep it, is because in working with middle school kids and working with developmentally kids, they can come and we can consequence them all the time. And that sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But what this helps me to do is we keep telling them to be the best version of themselves. And that's kind of what's articulated in this policy. In expectations, sorry, right. So that's kind of what's in here. And when I read things like your shorts can't be any more than your fingertips, I have to be honest with you, I've worked under policies like that and they never work. And some of the things that kids will come back to me, and it's true, well, why are volleyball shorts okay? Why does the PE coach wear sport shorts? There's really not shorts out there. So what happens is the kids sort of push them down and it becomes kind of like the hood policy. You know, we don't openly allow any hoods. And when we started the school year, kids were wearing them and we worked really hard where, yeah, you at least point in the head, and most kids don't defy us, right? Like when we started it was like, no, they won't take them down. And they do, but it's been a work in progress. It's been, okay, now I point to you and you take it down. You're right, we still have more work to do with, sometimes they put them back up. But they're listening to us to take them down, and they're listening to other staff members to take them down. And do I want to see belly shirts? No, but I have to be honest with you, as people are going out buying clothes for their kids, that's what's there. So that's what the kids are coming in with. And I want it tighter. I want kids to look professional because that is the best version of themselves. But I think we need to move in a process that gets our kids to do it and to see why they're doing it. And I know we all want to accomplish the same thing. We all do. But I think it's the method in which we want to go about it that may differ a little.
Sure. That's fair.
Brian,
Yeah,
anything to add?
and your opening question was about, do we get a lot of complaints? I haven't had a complaint from a parent all year about dress code. We do get complaints from teachers. It's not the biggest thing people complain about. When I first got there, it was the cell phones. And now we've tackled that problem. The other thing that was a really big concern when I got to the high school is the number of physical altercations. And that's been another area we've really tried to focus on. Right now, the number one complaint we get is about passes and kids being where they shouldn't be in the hallways. But yes, certainly teachers do come to us and say about how a kid is dressed. And when we do have someone who comes to us about how a student is dressed, we have someone speak to that student. I forget who asked about what we do. We try to provide them with clothing other than what they are currently wearing and send them back to class. We don't want to kick a kid out of class for what they're wearing if we can get them to change their clothes and go back into the room.
We typically call home.
Yep.
We ask the parents if they can bring something else in. Sometimes they can't, sometimes they're working, sometimes we can't get a hold of a parent. The other option that we've used is we allow them to go to the care closet and take something from the care closet. when it is brought to us, when we see it.
Can I ask a question about that?
Go ahead.
Do you ever get a complaint from a parent because you've required a child to cover up what they've allowed them to come to school wearing?
More frequently when I was at the middle school than now that I'm at the high school.
Okay.
At the high school, the parents normally, honestly, when we're calling for kids who frequently violate policy, most of the parents don't answer. So we don't get into many verbal confrontations with them because, we leave a voicemail, but that's about what happens with the lower level discipline stuff. But when I was at the middle school, yes, I would have plenty of parents who would become very irate.
And there are some parents who the children get to school wearing different articles than they left.
Oh, when they left there, yeah.
Of course.
Right.
So we do have that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like you said about the skirt rolling it up,
Right.
there's also the crop tops where they'll get the yoga pants and bring them up high, so then you can't see the skin.
And they flip them back down.
Of course.
I think like with anything, I mean, it is true that it's difficult to find. Well, it's difficult to find clothes that kids want to wear
Yes.
that also meet these standards. So it's not, you can find clothes that meet these standards. So I think this, like anything, would be a matter of everybody has to buy in. Everybody has to say, this is the standard and this is what it's going to be. And yes, that's frustrating. I mean, I have a daughter, she's 18 now, but we went through all these conversations. Like, I understand it is hard. It is hard. And the stuff that everybody also, if you see other kids wearing stuff, like I get the family beefs that happen, like all of it. I totally understand all the factors. And that's where we, and maybe we as a board, like have to be that not the heavies in like a bad way, but we'll take the heat if you guys have to enforce something that we as a board say, this is the standard, this is what it's going to be. And people will have to shop differently or where, I mean, it's like, it would be like the yonder pouches, only much less. I think if we tried to institute uniforms, I think that's the other option that gets thrown out there. And I think that would actually be much more difficult and stressful for families and probably much more controversial than us just maintaining a common dress code for everybody, common expectations. And like, I personally, I'm going to disagree with Kathy's assessment about needing to add that E because it wasn't brought to these changes weren't brought to the board, but in fairness to the administrators involved in making those changes, we didn't specifically require that anywhere. So if it's required, then everybody's on the same page. But I would be totally fine with, because maybe some of these things in this longer dress code aren't the issues that you guys are seeing, but maybe you're seeing other things. Like, I'm totally fine with this being revised at the building level and bringing back something, but knowing that it needs to be something that is not subjective, because the bad part with subjective things, from a teacher perspective, you may not be getting referrals as an administrator because teachers don't want to refer kids for something that's subjective. And also, if it's subjective, then you have the one kid, how come I got referred for this, but she didn't get referred for this? Well, it's subjective, right? And so maybe there's a way to marry, because I understand what you're saying about wanting the kids to make decisions for good reasons and all of that, and like the kind of philosophical aspect of it. And maybe there's a way to marry both of those things, because it can be, we want you to make these decisions for these good reasons. We're currently in authority over you as a minor child who's part of our school district. Here's what we believe this looks like. Here's what we're teaching you through this standard, what good decisions for dress look like. Because then you will get out into a point in your life, or the second you walk outside of school, where you can wear whatever, right? That's where our authority ends. But we can use it as a teaching tool, not only that why it's important, but here's what this looks like in practice, is these different standards. And there can be discussion on what those standards should be, So, I mean, I'm willing to make my case to the board. I don't necessarily want all of this verbiage in the board policy, but I think that there should be an understanding that the board will receive a revised, something revised, maybe blending the current and the previous expectations that administration can bring back to us. And I'm happy to make that case to the full board if.
Okay, so B says the regulations, which are the expectations in my mind, will be issued by the administration and periodically reviewed and revised as appropriate to provide further guidance and interpretation regarding this code. So that's what their dress code expectations is. So what you want is they revise it, then they have to bring it to us, and then we say yes or no. So in effect, we're dictating what they can and can't do in their building.
Well, that happens with lots of other things. I mean, I don't think that the board has any desire to sit here and talk for hours about how many inches exactly a skirt should be. But this is a huge change, right? This is a huge change. And obviously there's, like, we wouldn't be
But the
having.
policy says that they can.
Yes, I know, and that's why I think we need to change the policy to specify that changes have to come to the board. That doesn't mean that the board would vote those changes down. I mean, but I think that if it's,
Well, it has to come to the
that-
board for approval. So the board has to approve. The board has
Well,
to
if it's
approve
reasonable.
what they're doing in their building.
I think that's a reasonable.
We don't
requirement.
approve procedures, the procedures they do in their building. We approve the policy.
We have a right to
And-
write policy that dictates what we do and do not approve. That's part of what our role is as boards. So I think that's fair. If you want to weigh in with our attorney and ask if we're violating something by putting that in there, but I don't think we
Okay.
are. I'm
What
not
I-
aware that we are.
What I'm saying is, we make the policy, the schools, whatever administrators, right? Enforce the policy,
Mhm.
okay? So in our policy, it says that they will come up with regulations, which is a procedure. So they come up with procedures in order to follow the policy. Like they come up with a procedure for, we've had procedures for other policies, like, I don't know.
I think that are just site procedures, they're
Just
not
right,
policies.
right, like in a fire drill, you go down that set of stairs. That's their procedure for that particular school.
Emergency, right.
Right, so this is the procedure for this policy. So if you have an issue with the procedure, or if a parent or whatever has an issue with the procedure, then that should be taken up at the building level. Because they're following the policy, because they came up with regulations. But you think the regulations are too vague. They think that it's working. If we want them to rework their regulations, we can ask them to, but they're following the policy.
Right, but we have the authority as the board to change the policy. And there's a difference between what staircase you go down during a fire drill and what is the district-wide standard for how our students are allowed to present themselves, because it goes home in the parent handbook. So there's lots of other things in the parent handbook that tie back to board policy. I don't think it's outside of
Okay.
range.
Kathy?
Is there a reason why our shipment doesn't have a dress code policy? Because it seems like we're going back and forth over there. And why don't they have a dress code policy if it's something that we should be giving this much attention and specificity to? Just wondering.
You want to tackle that one?
I was gonna say, do you want me
That's-
to go, or you guys want to go, or?
Go ahead, Kim, and then I will.
No, I think it's exactly what some of the board members have been saying, that from Shipman's perspective, from a legal perspective, it's a building function. So they don't even have a model policy that has our 4 bullets that we have in our policy, because from Shipman's perspective, it is not something that should be a board policy. It's something that has to be handled on a more day-to-day basis. And so with adding this sentence that you're proposing here, what could happen is if all of a sudden a major trend changes, now before they can address it, like the next day at the building, it would have to come before the board, and that could create more of a safety issue at the site level versus supporting the schools. That would be my thought process on why there's no board policy recommendation from Shipman.
It's a protocol or procedure
Right.
versus a policy.
Can I just offer a possible solution? So in my mind, like I look at a lot of this stuff, like, do we care if a 6th grader wears a headband? I don't know. Could we consider things that are like a definitive to the board, that's not allowed. Like in my mind, the sports bras drive me through the roof. So like to me, from a Board of Education, sports bras are not allowed. I don't care what the circumstances is, but could we make a few things that are like, they're not allowed in the schools, and then,
Yeah.
and then the non-negotiables, and then leave the headbands and those type of things up to the sites, like,
Yeah, but we're here to talk about policy,
So-
we're not talking
I know, I'm
about,
saying putting the things that are, because we're gonna fight about these two documents for 2 months.
right, why don't we just move forward with what we're saying here? Go to the full board, whether we wanna add section E or not, and just, let's move on. I mean, enough's enough. I mean,
Right,
we're
so the
going in
question
circles here.
is, yeah, so it's that, or do you wanna put specific things that the board doesn't want, and then let the administration deal with all the other stuff? Is there specific things that we absolutely
Yeah, I
can't
think
move?
let the administrators do what they've gotta do, but with all due respect, I don't think we could have parents and teachers writing a dress code for a school, you know. At this point, hey, you can come in with a big pot leaf on your shirt. Pot's legal now. Is it considered a drug? That's okay. It's too vague to me, in my opinion. But if he's okay with enforcing it, then I guess it's okay. But I just think it's a little, we should at least give a little bit of a, Pope John Paul blessing on something, a little bit.
They do cover, I mean, it's not much, but they cover. Yeah, like you can't show us your body, it's in there, you know?
There's not a time
not-
where I can't reference this to say that you can't wear something. It's when you get to the more prescribed list, like this one, somebody had come in with some political t-shirts, and I was able to reference the likely to incite.
Okay, I got a
Because
problem with that.
there
So if
was
somebody wears a
something that we
MAGA
could
hat,
do.
you can't wear a MAGA hat because it's gonna incite?
Well, it was something that caused a distraction and it caused something. So we were able to address
wrong.
it in the site that it did cause something.
Then if that's what this is used for, if you have that in there, likely to incite just because of a specific political view, then. That's
No,
up to-
she's
No,
saying
it
that
wasn't
she was
that.
able
Whatever
to
it may
do
be.
that.
No, it was.
Could be
yeah.
anything, it could
Yeah.
be a violent
Exactly.
graphic.
It's
or-
arbitrary.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
But A
So
is.
teacher
is
A
one
may
of the
be okay with it,
expectations.
teacher
A
B is
one of the
not.
Expectations.
You're confusing the kids.
I remember we talked kind of like, threw the word business casual around it, a few years
We
ago.
did,
but
We
that
talked-
were- that
we
was
did, but that was for
staff.
staff.
Yeah.
Right.
And
for-
that's a whole other.
There you go. I was gonna go there,
Talking
but that is,
about,
Yeah.
right.
But also, business casual has also changed.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh, we've heard.
yeah,
Yes, yes.
to include yoga
Yeah.
pants,
Yeah.
obviously.
And that's probably more
No
than we
yoga
want,
pants,
that's
no yoga
probably more
pants.
than what we
I'll
want
tell
to
you what,
require for kids.
I'll
you
wear
know?
yoga pants for a week, the kids will never wear them.
And a crop top?
And a crop top, we'll put that stuff to bed right away.
Yeah.
I mean, like I would be totally fine, Fiona, with your suggestion of some non-negotiables, but I think that what those non-negotiables are would be a whole nother conversation, and it's not all that much different than us
So,
putting E in there.
okay, so I have a suggestion then. Instead of putting E in, leave as is. And how about we have, and I can meet with you guys too, sit down, and if you have suggestions as to what you want not in the procedures, then we'll come up with another procedures that's more
Any procedures? What do you-
expectations, that's more comprehensive.
To bring back to the board.
To bring
you're
back to the,
saying.
right,
We can't.
to bring back to this committee.
so, but I think what you're saying is the comprehensive list tied your hands more.
I'm even looking
Well-
at this, the difficult part oftentimes is like, we look, there's the two different versions, the shorts at the fingertips. But even in the elementary version here, which it seems is more accepted right now, it says the length of shorts or skirts must be appropriate as determined by administration. And I think the reason why these are so vague is because it's really, it really is hard to put those cut and dry. What are we going to say? Is it a length? Does it make a difference in what your body size is? How long your shorts can be? There's so
Or
many
how long your
variables
arms
in it.
are.
Yeah.
Well, her legs, I had a problem with
Yeah.
my daughters because her legs are so long.
Yes.
No matter what shorts you buy, her arms would always be below the shorts.
Yeah.
When she was in middle school, she got in trouble for it, but like,
Right.
we couldn't find anything that fit her unless you bought her the big gym shorts that went down to her knees.
Right.
But
But Shelley, you're
girls.
right, right, depending on
Exactly.
the right.
Right.
What the
And
child
right.
looks
Especially at
like,
middle school.
honestly.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even in elementary, sometimes,
Yeah.
right, they're like babies.
But I've had more than once this year. I'm like, hey, and then the girl's like, oh, I'll pull down. No, don't pull down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't just,
Yeah.
because there's no winning. There's
Yeah,
no win-
right.
And
You're gonna
as-
lose it, gain
And
it.
as somebody who teaches social studies, I don't want that in my life. Like I want to be
Yeah.
able to do this, and move on.
Yeah.
So
Which is
Or
the
they'll say-
same conversation that I had with the security associates, quite frankly. Male security associates have stated openly during some of these meetings that they're stressed about some of the conversations they have to have with the kids
Mhm.
because they're afraid they're gonna be accused of looking where they shouldn't be looking.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And the
Which
girl
is
with the
actually their
short.
job, though, if you think about it.
Well, their job is enforcement.
How are you gonna
Dress
know if her
code.
shorts are too short unless you're actually looking where the shorts are being worn?
But if you
Somebody
say
sees
the
your
skirt is
eyeballs, oh, he's a creeper.
Right.
You're gonna be,
right.
you're gonna be,
Right.
one person just has to see
Right.
that and you're gonna be stereotyped
Well,
forever.
But
that's where
also
you
the
go
ones
back.
with the
That's your
shorty
job, right?
shorts will say, oh, but I have booty shorts underneath, and they'll show you. It's like, no.
Right, yeah. And that's where the fingertip thing does make sense, because everybody before they leave the house can stand in front of the mirror and say, is anybody gonna tell me my shorts are too short based on?
Well, it can,
Because
but,
it's
But the
there's-
elementary is
It's measurable.
clear,
but the,
too.
but the other side of that is, okay, I'm in third grade and I have this giant growth spurt,
Yeah.
but my
No,
parents
you're
can't
right.
afford clothes.
Correct,
So
right.
now my shorts are up here, but my
Right.
hand is down here, and I'll get in trouble for
yeah.
wearing it to school, and I have nothing else I can wear, so
Right.
that's
Mhm.
where that
Yes.
restriction.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference between a kid who's outgrown their shorts and a girl with a sports bra and booty shorts with her butt
Yes.
hanging out.
I haven't seen like the sports bra thing or things. We do see some of the midriffs and we'll make them put a coat. Right now, that's
A
to me, the
jacket,
biggest violation is the midriffs.
the midriffs.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
I would-
some of the
yeah,
girls
if
that
it were-
are
if it were
very
made a-
developed.
The yoga pants are problematic for the for
Wow.
many, for many of the 13-year-old boys. They're
Yeah.
problematic. Um,
Yeah.
the-
It is though, that's just
the-
human development.
the
I mean,
hood-
you can laugh
the
about it all you
hoods
want, it's just
are,
the truth.
but that's really all I wouldn't.
It's the midriffs and the hoods.
But they
And-
comply when you say,
And this,
mostly. I mean, it's just a tiny
But can I-
percentage that
But
don't.
can I give you
Comply.
kind
I
of
wanna tell you
the
what my take is.
frustration? And again, I'm not pointing fingers, and not all of this is like most of this isn't. It's stuff that people say. It's say I'll be teaching a class and there's a girl and she's not doing whatever, and I say, Shelley, you know what, this girl, and the girl's gonna, sure, Miss Rinaldi, and she zips right up, and then as soon as Miss Rinaldi shuts the door, she zips right down, and that gives many teachers just such a sense of frustration,
Mhm.
and that's what.
So what would you do in that
but that's
instance,
true
though?
with everything, not just dress
Right,
code, right?
but
I
what
mean,
would you do
yeah.
in that situation?
I think maybe if there's a conversation of that, it's a different kind of a conduct thing, like it's a willful.
That's defiance.
That's a
Right,
defiance.
Goes
right.
into
Exactly.
something
And I
else.
think that's
agree.
probably a conversation as a
Right.
staff that needs to be
Yeah.
had.
Right.
is, when you see a kid doing and again, I probably don't care if the kids wear hoods. Whatever you guys decide, it is fine by me. But if the kid takes the hood off from me and then they walk by and they flick it back on, at some point do we start gathering their names down and say, hey,
Right.
we have to have a conversation because you're being defiant with this
Right.
stuff.
Because
It
they don't
becomes
realize they're being
A
defiant.
different issue.
Right.
Well, that's not a dress code violation. That is your dress expectation. That is, hey, total disregard.
And
Yeah.
maybe that's just like a school-wide conversation about, we
Right.
just, like you're disrespecting me by doing that.
And that's where that second piece of it comes in, because had heard in the past that dress code violations were not treated like disciplinary violations. It was somebody said something, maybe said something to the person at the time, but it wasn't handled procedurally as defiance, especially something that recurs. I mean, so I think looking at that again, because it's one thing to make a girl go put on a big ugly t-shirt, but if she does that to you every day for the whole year, or figures it's worth a shot, right? Because why not? Maybe she could capture, maybe you don't. I mean, that's, there should be some sort of progressive discipline with that as
I
well,
just
like there
checked,
is
there's
for yonder.
been one referral since the beginning of the year for dress code. So it's sort of like, I think we've gotten to the point where kids are listening, and I think you're right, and that becomes, if, another thing, if they're putting it back up, then that does become something that we do need to address, I would
And
agree.
maybe even just addressing it at a staff meeting, that you
Yeah.
encourage
Right.
teachers to not be frustrated and to
Yeah.
say
Right.
that if it's a defiant behavior, if they are doing it when you leave the room, then it's gotta be entered.
So then it wouldn't come to you as a dress code, it would come to you as defiance,
Right.
if it went that way, so. Glenn?
I believe before some of us got reprimanded for talking about stuff that wasn't specific about the policy. So can we get back on task here and move on to the next? I think we've dragged this out pretty long here.
Okay, so my suggestion is to keep this as is and have, and I can meet with you if you want to also, anyone will have a meeting to address our concerns and something that we can come up with for expectations.
Does anybody know when this policy was revised? If there was like a survey given out to staff or anything like that, that it took staff feedback? Because I think that the fact that staff have concerns about the code and you're not getting the referrals indicating the staff concerns tells me that there's more information out there that probably we don't have that we might want to consider. So I wonder if that, because I do think this needs to be revised, if this part of this revising process includes getting staff feedback about what are the biggest concerns that you see, and then maybe troubleshooting how to deal with that.
It was revised twice in the same year.
Yeah,
Those were when we were changing the policy numbers, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
When we were
2011, that's when
changing the
it was.
series, we
Nine,
didn't change
so-
the context.
right.
Right,
And I mean to say, I'm referring to what shows up in the handbooks,
Yeah.
what people are bound to
Right.
at the building level is what I'm
versus the
referring to.
policy.
Versus the policy.
Because the policy is the board's purview, and then, just for the expectation, you're saying get some feedback from the staff. But I think that the biggest, I just wanted to add, the biggest
ahead.
issue is what Mark is saying, that the administration thinks that they've dealt with it, because they've said to the kid, and the kid is complying, but they don't know that down the hallway, kid put the hood back up, or unzip the, or whatever. So they're saying, hey, I think it's dealt with. So that's the hard part in terms of the follow-up with clothing.
So then maybe the administration, like Mark said, needs to have a PD
Right.
for, the faculty and whatever, and then bring us your feedback. Yes,
Until this is actually amended, they can do whatever they want with their handbook, technically, correct?
but,
Yes.
right,
Okay, so
but what I
why don't we
said is,
step one, let's do this, and
I-
then once this is changed, then we can
okay,
worry about.
but what I said was, leave the policy as is, A through D, and then they will handle their buildings. I agree with Kathy. I don't think expectation changes need to be approved by the full board. But their expectations or procedures or whatever you call it,
I would disagree with that. I would just on putting letter E in there. It should be supervised in some way. I don't think we could have parents coming up with dress codes.
the parent didn't
talking
come
more
up with a
about
dress
equity and
code.
Inclusion in actual dress
A
code.
parent did not come up with a dress code. The administration met with administrators, parents, faculty,
Okay.
and they
Parents.
came up, the parents were
included
involved.
in the dress code.
But how many?
It was
I
like
mean,
a
how many
panel.
people are we talking about? And
People
how was
we don't
that
want.
panel selected? I mean, those are all the questions that you would then have to go back and ask if there's not gonna be any other oversight, something like that.
I feel that the building administrators should control their building.
Absolutely, I agree with it too.
I don't
But
think
I
the Board
think-
of Ed should approve procedures. We don't approve procedures for anything else. If we have issues with a procedure, then we talk to the
How do we get it to the
administrator.
full board and let the full board decide?
Sounds good to me.
What do you think? I'm talking to you,
We're not
Ed.
going anywhere here.
No,
Yeah, it feels like a circle, so if you want to bring it to the full board and see what they say, I mean, I'm happy to say, hey, like, I think they have the impression you guys would like to see it tightened up a little bit, or.
So we don't, okay.
I'm
We
sorry,
don't want to see the
the specific-
policy tightened up. We want to see the procedures or
Right.
expectations tightened up.
Right, right.
some.
No, we have to
some
tighten up the
committee
policy
members.
before we can even
Yeah.
deal with anything with the procedures.
Right, so we're the committee itself is divided on how
If
to
you choose
handle
to do
this. So-
nothing, then we're
Okay.
The
just
best way-
completely
So
wasting our
then we
time.
should bring it to the full board for a discussion of the policy as is,
Mhm.
or
With that.
with E. And we'll discuss at the full board.
And I think Kim made a salient point about the possibility of something coming up that needs to be addressed in a timely manner, and I think that we could maybe, like, you can still say that changes need to be approved by the full board on an emergency basis. Changes can be implemented prior to approval, with it coming to the board at the subsequent board meeting or something like that. Like, there is a way to address that concern, that is a valid concern.
So, can I ask one more question? I don't mean.
Sure.
So do you review the handbooks and policies, or is it strictly just the administration at the school itself?
During the summer, it's really a review of handbooks. So I'm in admin meetings with, similar to what we did with the behavior
So
expectations.
short answer is yes.
So, yes,
Okay.
we go through it during the summertime,
Every summer.
each year. Yeah,
Mhm.
and we review it.
Joanne, do you have anything to add?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
No, you've been very quiet.
Joanne didn't even want to sit at the table.
It's no pressure, you don't have to.
I think that the administration really can, I think that the policy states what needs to happen. And I think the policy as it is does that. Clearly, there are questions about whether the expectations should have more detail. But that's another discussion, I think, than the policy itself. So I think I better, less is more. I'd say at this table.
You're fine.
Fiona, anything else to add?
Just the only thing I think is whatever we're having, like we should have some uniform rules, whether it be in the handbooks, because I mean, there's kids at elementary too that are wearing like some inappropriate shirts with some wording and hats. And it should be like in Torrington, this is the expectation all the way up, right? And I think consistency is better for kids than different things at every building and not really.
Yeah, like Raider Pride.
Right, just like this is our standards and it's our standards K through 12. Not that a child, obviously in elementary is gonna wear a sports bra, but I think
But you don't want them to,
some
right?
basic
If they did, it
things.
wouldn't be okay, so you could put that as a standard, because it is against the rules for everybody. Or clear.
Okay, to the board.
So to the board, and it's as is or adding the number E, is that,
Mhm.
is that
Yes.
how, okay,
Mhm.
the number E,
Letter E.
letter E,
Yeah.
oh boy.
It's getting,
It's getting late.
Yeah.
Yeah,
motion to adjourn.
Oh,
I think we need to go through the next 3, 4.
Well, what are you moving to the board though? Are you moving it with E or without E?
either or, I think, was the, right?
We're moving it without E, and then E as a discussion if
Yeah.
that's what the full board wants to do. Make sense? Yes?
Yeah, so you move the current policy as a discussion item and possible action item. The only action that would be taken is if through our discussion, we move to change it.
Right. Okay, so B, C, D, and E are policies we do not have, and by law we need.
You can.
Yes?
Thank you very
Kim,
much.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
These are part of our crosswalk. These 4 policies are all policies that are in Shipman's model policy book. We don't have policies, and I believe, Sue, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in all cases, we are doing this stuff, it's just that we
Yes.
didn't have a policy.
Yes, correct. And we
So-
have found that quite a bit actually as we've gone through, and I think we've mentioned that to you folks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are all practices that are taking place, you know, pretty religiously, but we don't have it grounded in policy. Good night.
Thank you very much.
And yes, these are all in Shipman's model policy index, and we are strongly encouraged to adopt these policies to document what's happening.
Okay, so I have a question on page 61 of 84, the optional.
Okay. This is where we're getting ourselves in trouble.
Mhm.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yep,
Since we don't have any policies and we're required to on these things, that for now you adopt it without any optional provisions.
that's what I was
Just
gonna
what we're
suggest.
required, and
Yep.
then if you want to add options later, do that.
Okay.
That's what I was going to suggest for all 4 of them. If there are any,
So all those would go to the full board then.
then to the full board, yep. Okay,
Even in the example that you guys are talking about, that's happening.
Yeah,
You know,
doing that.
right, you know, if they're gonna do a donor's choose, they don't just randomly do it. They go to the principal and
Right.
say,
Have to
hey,
let them
you know, but yes, dropped all 4. So move to the full board without the optional
Without
provisions.
options,
Okay.
yep. And then we can revisit.
Can I ask about the one on page 64? Like, this is, there's just this whole header at the top. And it says this policy is offered as a sample for consideration. Boards of Education may consider other reasonable rules. So what portions of this are dictated by statute?
Which one is this? Physical
Physical activity and
Oh,
undirected
the
play.
undirected play.
So you can't, so does this say that you can't punish a kid by
Yes.
telling them they can't
Yes.
have recess?
Correct. Correct.
Is that legally
That's in
required?
statute.
You you
Yes.
can't do that.
You can't remove recess as a disciplinary measure per Connecticut state statute.
Correct.
This has been on the books for quite a while.
Probably the last 10 years. But usually what happens is they just restrict it. So they have recess, but it is they don't get to choose what their activity is. They have to stay in a certain area. For example, like Torrington, they have that small little courtyard area. So they can be in that area, but they're not able to go and have fun with their friends. So when we were at Forbes, they had a restricted area, and then somebody had to watch the restricted area.
So you're,
And then, so they're still outside, they're with other kids, but
And
They
in
made
some
a bad
cases
choice,
too, it
so.
was the length of the recess period. Like for a while, it was 20 minutes. You know, you could take the first 10 minutes, but the child had to be allowed to
at
have
least the 20.
at least 20 minutes of physical activity. Um,
Right, I think that's,
You
On
do it
page
now by
65
that
at the
other
top.
assessment, we
Yeah.
had like 10%. We do even maintenance.
It's not permitted to.
yeah, so the full 20 minutes, so they require the 20.
Right, it's on the next page.
Yeah,
So they can sit up for 10.
Right.
right,
so they could sit out for 10 and then have 20 minutes of restricted play.
correct.
So they're still receiving, it's still.
Some, right,
Yeah.
type of physical activity.
Right,
So
they could
instead
move,
of,
but they
yeah,
might not be able to join the kicker
They
game.
get, they get
Right.
like.
But they can
sentenced-
run
they can
laps.
jump
Yeah,
ropes.
they get sentenced
or,
to tetherball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You get tetherball again.
Or go
Sentenced,
sit on
yeah.
the wall for
Or-
10 minutes. I mean, I
Yeah.
think back on it. Like,
Yeah,
oh my
that's like
God.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, obviously, we want to do what the state is requiring. I was just unclear. When I was looking at this earlier today, I was unclear on, after reading that, what exactly the statute was and what was the optional part. So
Okay, so the full board without optional? Yes, Glenn?
Sure.
We've been here so long, John's off to his weekend wedding.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, okay. Top picks for
Oh, you're still
future.
there.
Oh,
You're
Oh, you're muted.
John. Probably for the best.
Just as well that I'm muted tonight.
That's I'm just thankful you're still with us, John.
You're welcome.
Topics for future meetings, the walk,
Crosswalk.
continue. Okay, comments for the good of the order. John, any comments?
No, not especially long meeting, but you long topics, that's all.
Thank you. Kim?
No.
Glenn?
Nope, pass.
You're gonna write it down and come up
I'm
with
gonna go home and
something
have
later on.
With your t-shirt on,
Yeah.
right?
Right, with your pot t-shirt on? Jess?
No, good discussion, and I think that anything like this, you're gonna get different opinions, and it's good that we can all feel safe to express those opinions. And I appreciate Sue and Sue bringing the information that I had requested.
I'm gonna pass.
Fiona? Joanne, you have a lot to say. Come on.
I'll save it for another time.
Joanne's like, I'm never sitting at this table again.
Write it down. Right. I appreciate you, Joanne. Sue?
Oh, good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's such a distant memory already.
Yeah.
Okay, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
8:55.
What's it like to be the